much to everybody for joining.
Sure thing. Thank you, Olivia. I just wanted to say good afternoon and welcome everyone to our first informational webinar under the newly launched Textile Renewal Alliance. It's great to see so much participation in these and the growing interest in California's extended producer responsibility program for textiles, which is the first in the nation program created by the passage of Senate Bill 707, which was a Senator Newman bill in 2024. And we are pleased with all the interest in the work that we are doing to establish a prospective producer responsibility organization for the program implementation. The California Retailers Association, the American Apparel and Footwear Association, and the National Retail Federation have been collaborating over the past year to create a nonprofit organization that meets the requirements of SB 707, is eligible to apply to CalRecycle as a prospective pro, and will hopefully have the opportunity to support all producers in meeting their obligations under this textile EPR law. Textile Renewal Alliance is dedicated to ensuring that apparel and textiles are diverted from landfill and collected, repaired, reused, and recycled after use in compliance with SB 707. We are committed to the successful implementation of California's textile EPR program, and we look forward to continuing to collaborate with all producers and members of the California textile community. Today, you will hear from some of our partners who are supporting us in establishing this organization, and we welcome you to reach out to them or us with any questions you may have following today's webinar. So go ahead, Olivia, back to you.
Thanks so much, Era, and thanks everyone for being here today. Just brief second intro. As Sarah mentioned, I'm Olivia. I'm part of the team that has been supporting the three associations Sarah mentioned, with setting up Textile Renewal Alliance and preparing to apply to CalRecycle as the prospective PRO. We'll also be hearing from my colleague, Missa Adler, who I'll introduce herself before her slides, but wanted to also acknowledge and thank the teams and the associations who have been steering this work, along with other expert consultants who have been working to ensure that we are building an organization that is set up to meet all the obligations and requirements under California's landmark law. Some of those requirements are imminent, and you'll hear more about that today. So with that, Mike, could you please advance to the next slide? We'll start our legal disclaimer and a quick bit of housekeeping. First, the presentation is intended to serve as information only. We are not lawyers and cannot provide legal advice. Please do not take anything we share with you today as such. Next slide, please. We are recording this presentation, as you've probably gathered. We will share it out with the group for future reference, both the recording and the deck itself. We are going to stop recording at questions to encourage open Q&A, and we'll do our very best to respond to all questions. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function as opposed to the chat. Our team is monitoring that throughout the presentation. We'll make sure we leave ample time to share those questions along with our responses at the end of the call. With that said, we may not get to everything, or you may walk away and realize you still have a question and follow up to this presentation. So as Sarah mentioned, we're all available for follow-up after this. Please feel free to reach out to us at info@textilerenewal.org with any follow-ups. We monitor that mailbox daily. We'll get back to you in a timely fashion. Mike, next slide, please. So for our agenda today, I'm just going to quickly let you know where we're going here, and then we'll jump into it. We're already in the process of crossing agenda item 1 off our list. After that, we're going to take a step back and help anyone who may be new to the topic understand what extended producer responsibility is and does, and what does that mean for textiles specifically in California. We'll dive a little bit deeper into the background on SB 707, California's textile EPR law, the products that will be managed through that program once the program's operational, and the roles that the different entities play in a successful system, focusing on the role of the pro, of CalRecycle, the regulator, and of service providers. We're then going to share a bit more about Textile Renewal Alliance. We'll reflect on the organization's origins, the structure, and the work we've been doing to prepare to meet the very first requirements of SB 707, starting with that application process. We'll then take a closer look at producer definitions and obligations, recognizing that we have a lot of companies on this call that we would expect to have obligations. We know this is a hot topic. We'll do our best to share as much as we know today and we'll certainly continue to update you as we get more information in future webinars. I'll just conclude with grounding ourselves in the overarching implementation timeline for SB 707 and ways that you can continue to stay engaged with us in the process. So with that, I will pass it over to my colleague Marissa for a bit of a primer on EPR and SB 707.
Great. Thanks, Olivia, and thanks, Sarah, for kicking us off. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm Marissa Adler. I'm one of the consultants that's working on this team to launch the Textile Renewal Alliance. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide. We wanted to start off with a primer. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with what extended producer responsibility is, but some of you may not be as familiar. So extended producer responsibility is a policy approach that places the financial and/or operational responsibility for the end-of-life management of designated products onto the producers instead of on today's system, which is on municipalities, ratepayers, and taxpayers. EPR typically requires producers to fund the cost of collection, reuse, recycling of covered products to make sure that those products don't end up in landfill, incineration, or mismanaged in the environment. California's textile EPR law, known as SB 707, focuses on consumer-facing textiles like apparel, footwear, home textiles, health and hospitality textiles, etc. And it prioritizes reuse, repair, and the use of responsible end markets. Go to the next slide. So the law is the first textile EPR program in North America, following its introduction by Senator Newman and subsequent signing into law by Governor Newsom in September of 2024. It went through a couple-year development process, and the law obligates apparel and textile producers that sell in or into California to form a single nonprofit PRO and fund the responsible end-of-life management of apparel and textile covered products. That PRO, on behalf of the producers, is responsible for developing and implementing a program plan that meets the requirements of the law. So the law is very specific about which apparel and textile articles are and are not considered covered products. This is just a partial list for example, but the full list can be found in statute and on our website. That said, we encourage all producers, again, to consult with legal counsel to determine which, if any, of their products specifically are covered and to identify any gray areas where you're not really sure if it's a covered product and that will require clarification with CalRecycle during the rulemaking process. It's important that producers have a clear understanding of how their products do or do not meet the definition of covered products, because things like producer reporting, fees, and overall compliance really depend on having a really good understanding of that. So, what are the roles in a textile EPR ecosystem? If you start at the center of this diagram, you'll see a circle that says Producer Responsibility Organization. This is the PRO, and it plays a central role in the whole EPR landscape. The PRO, we think of it as the operational arm that helps producers comply with EPR obligations by collecting and responsibly managing the covered products according to the law. The PRO develops a program plan, it sets the performance standards, and it develops an equitable producer fee structure for covered products, as well as complies with mandatory reporting to the state oversight agency. Producers on the left are the obligated parties who fund the system and are legally mandated to take responsibility for their products after consumer use. Producers remit payment to the PRO according to the fee schedule that's set by the PRO. They collect and report data to the PRO on covered products sold in or into California, or whichever state is the EPR program is in. They meet producer-specific performance targets set by the PRO in the program plan. On the right-hand side of the diagram, you'll see service providers and local governments. These entities are the ones who are usually collecting, sorting, repairing, repurposing, recycling covered products, and they report activities to the PRO, often under contract, while also being reimbursed for the authorized activities that they're carrying out on behalf of the PRO. And then the state agency on the top is, in this case, CalRecycle, and they are what we're calling the enforcer, and they oversee, regulate, and enforce the law, including developing the regulations, clarifying the law's intent, approving PRO plans, and monitoring compliance. So you can see there's a lot of interacting between all the different stakeholders in the system, and there's a lot of checks and balances throughout the whole process in the way that an EPR system is structured. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Olivia.
Thanks, Marissa. And before we go to the next slide, I'll just note that I think we recognize that EPR programs are incredibly complex and pull in a lot of different interested parties and organizations and individuals whose collaboration is really essential to make the system work. So we certainly don't intend to oversimplify it by just showing those four primary entities. Those are the major actors in the system, and certainly there are others who will be touched by the program, who will contribute to the program. And I think one that I would just make is consumers obviously played a huge role in the program, and one of the responsibilities of the PRO, which we may not get into today, but we'll certainly get into in future sessions, is ensuring that those who are using the covered products before they come to the end of their life with that user really have to be educated on how the program is going to operate and what they can do to help divert that material from landfill and ensure it's either going towards repair, reuse, repurposing, or recycling. So with that, I will just ask Mike to go to the next slide, please. Thanks, Mike. So about Textile Renewal Alliance, you've heard a little bit already, and we've also, earlier this year announced that California Retailers Association, American Apparel and Footwear Association, and the National Retail Federation had signed an MOU to form a prospective textile PRO. Thrilled to have a name for that organization now, as well as a brand and a website, a place where you and other stakeholders can go and sort of follow along our progress and get important updates and see invitations to things like this webinar. So anyway, that MOU was formalized earlier this year. And as Marissa mentioned, the first obligation under SB 707 is for producers to form and then join a PRO. This law requires a PRO to have a governing board consisting of producers that are diverse in size and type and represent the diversity of covered products placed in the market by those entities. And those board members must be named in a prospective PRO's application. So this is a requirement that these associations recognized shortly after the passage of law and felt they were well positioned to support given the breadth and the depth of their memberships. And so much of the work this year has been focused on building the internal infrastructure for a producer-led organization per the statute that has the ability, if approved, to move fast to educate and involve all producers who are going to have individual obligations under SB 707. We'll present the high-level timeline shortly, but I want to underscore that after PRO formation, which is the first producer obligation, as mentioned, all producers must then individually register with the approved PRO by July of 2026. So very much at the beginning stage here, but tight deadlines and a lot of activity coming up. I will let Marissa go deeper into the producer obligations, but for now, I'll just say that in addition to helping individual producers meet their statutory obligations and serving as a compliance partner, TR is, of course, striving to ensure that producer investment leads to real environmental outcomes, and that it is supportive of the intention in the law to divert textiles from landfill and ensure they are collected and repaired, used, or recycled, as we've now said a few times. Next slide, please. Before we get into how TR is structured, I want to underscore why we believe these associations and the support team that they've assembled, inclusive of consultants, a steering committee from the association memberships, are prepared to deliver an effective program for producers and all system stakeholders in California. First, collectively, this group has a diverse set of PRO building and textile recovery experience. We've developed and implemented producer responsibility and product stewardship programs before, including in California. And we believe this organization is well positioned to effectively reach producers and coordinate across the value chain. Our team has experience working across the textile and waste management landscape in California specifically, and is committed to building something that's right for and meets the unique needs of the state. So really the extensive relationships that this group has, combined with on-the-ground stewardship knowledge, direct experience designing recovery and compliance programs, we feel is really critical to building a practical, cost-effective pro and EPR system that can achieve results. Can we go to the next slide, please, Mike? So there's really nothing more important to this organization and the association that formed it than getting California right. The size and the state of the state and of its economy present such an opportunity for impact on its own. And beyond that, we know that other states are watching. The structure and governance we've built for TRA is responsive to the requirements of the pro application and the law in California, leveraging the experience and responsibilities of companies across different product categories through a producer-led board, while still recognizing that there are many individuals and organizations who can and should offer valuable expertise in support of program development and implementation. I want to note that while the associations that have supported the formation of TRA and are on the phone today are providing critical guidance, support, and then certainly convening power to stand up this organization, ultimately, they will move into a non-voting role in the organization. Those responsibilities will fall, as the law dictates, to the producers on the governing board. But again, we do recognize the importance of engaging the entire value chain and those who've already been investing in textile circularity and responsible management. And that's why we are creating a formal body to advise the board. We've been calling this the California Implementation Working Group, and it will comprise non-producer organizations that are actively involved in the California material management system today. So I should note before we just sort of touch on this group, consultation is not limited to the implementation working group or the board. TRA will have opportunities for all producers, all system stakeholders to provide input into the work, whether that's through consultations on the upcoming needs assessment process. Again, all of this is sort of if the organization is approved. And that needs assessment, which I'll touch on in a second, must be conducted between March 2026 and March 2027. So again, that's a real significant lift on a tight timeline, as well as would anticipate sort of cross-industry consultations on the program planning process. But we do want to make sure that there's a dedicated group with an on-ground perspective that can provide feedback, ideas on plans, and bring their own insights to the board on a regular cadence. So what you see on the screen here is the seats that we have allocated for the California Implementation Working Group. You'll note that there's some flexibility here as we recognize, again, that there are a lot of diverse perspectives and players that are currently contributing to or playing a role in textile management in California. We do have an application process, and we're seeking to fill the seats you see here before the end of the year. Specifically, we've got applications due November 21st. So if your organization is interested in serving as part of this group, which be formalized unless the organization was approved, would be a group that would want to be able to fill and articulate in the application, then do either reach out to us at info@textilerenewal.org or visit our website. And I think I just saw someone drop a link to that in the chat. So there is an application that is now live on our website. And I'll just say again that, anyone is welcome to apply. We are certainly interested in those that have direct experience in or knowledge of California so they can support the organization in navigating California's unique market conditions, waste management challenges and opportunities, and regulatory landscape. Next slide, please, Mike. So a lot of words on page. I'll try and summarize here for you. And before I hand back to Marissa, who's going to go back into the producer obligations, which I know is a real hot topic for many of our attendees, I do want to quickly summarize the work we've done to get to this point in preparation for that pro application and for the work that commences quickly once a pro is selected. So as we've already touched on to a certain extent, we've been working through all governance activities from our structure to the necessary corporate and financial policies and required filings, including 501c3 designation. We've spent a lot of time mapping out the requirements of SB 707. And then beyond that, drawn on our collective experience in building stewardship programs to identify the necessary activities between now and program start. And we'll go to the timeline in a bit. That's expected in 2030. We've begun preparing for some of the activities that start sooner, those that are right around the corner in 2026. That includes the statewide needs assessment I mentioned earlier. And just to briefly explain what that is under SB 707, that is a pro-led study that must precede program plan development. So it's really designed to provide insight into the amount and type of covered products that are in the California market today, how they are being managed, and what steps and infrastructure investments are necessary to ensure that they can be more effectively collected, repaired, reused, repurposed, recycled, in pursuit of performance targets that will be identified in the program plan. And I want to just reiterate a point that I think Marissa made, is just sort of that oversight role that CalRecycle plays. Things like the needs assessment and certainly the program plan, those all go back to the state regulatory agency, to CalRecycle, for review and amendment if needed, and ultimately approval before a program is operational. Related to the needs assessment, we put out requests for information to more than 275 stakeholders who we thought might be interested in either bidding for the needs assessment work, that'll be a competitive process next year if we're approved, or even just participating in the needs assessment process. Our thinking here, really more of a request for expressions of interest and information itself. But our thinking was to understand who has the data and information, and not to gather that data today. We were clear that organizations should not be sharing proprietary or sensitive data at this point. But we did want to understand, who's out there that has information that might be useful and would be interested in contributing to this process. And I want to thank all those who submitted responses, very helpful. And we sort of see those responses as giving us and whoever wins that bid for the needs assessment a bit of running start once that work takes off, if this pro is approved. And then, I think finally through this and other presentations and events, we've been trying to actively engage producers specifically, but also the broader stakeholder community, primarily through associations and coalitions, but also through one-on-one engagement. And, we're really striving to raise awareness for this group, to answer questions as best we can. There are probably more unknowns than knowns at this point in the process. And then establish, opportunities for both one-way communication like this and two-way communication like the Q&As, like some of the interactions we've been able to have since establishing our mailbox. And I will just say again, we monitor that daily. And if you have burning questions, that's a good place to go. We now have a website. We also have a monthly newsletter you can sign up for. We're really striving to keep producers and others informed on our work and developments as implementation progresses. So those are some of our core activities. There are many, many more behind the scenes. Again, we hope that by putting ourselves out there, we're creating space and opportunities for you and your organizations to feel comfortable reaching out for further conversation. We really do welcome those discussions. With that, I will turn it back to Marissa.
All right, wonderful. So let's get into a little bit about producer definitions and obligations. So the definitions of producer. SB 707 has a tiered definition of producer. And so that allows for some flexibility across stakeholders in the supply chain to kind of coordinate among themselves who's ultimately going to take the legal responsibility of joining the PRO and paying the fees. So the first tier is the manufacturer. It's a person who manufactures a covered product and owns or is the licensee of the brand or trademark. It bumps down to number 2 if no such person exists for number 1. And number 2 is the the brand or trademark owner or the exclusive licensee if the owner is not in state. If there is no such person under number 2, then the obligated producer bumps down to the importer of the covered product into the state for final sale or distribution. And then finally, if there's no such person in the state that falls under 1, 2, or 3, the producer is the distributor, retailer, or wholesaler who sells the product in or into the state. There are a couple of exclusions. So the following entities are not considered producers under SB 707: sellers that only sell secondhand products, and sellers with less than $1 million in aggregate annual turnover. In terms of producer obligations, the very first obligation, as Olivia mentioned, is for producers to register with the PRO by July 1st, 2026. So CalRecycle will select a PRO no later than March 1st, 2026. And from that point of selection through July 1st, 2026 is when every producer is legally mandated to register with the PRO. Producers also have to collect and report data to the PRO on the covered products sold in or into California. And eventually, the producers will pay fees upon approval of the program plan, which is anticipated to take place around 2030, July 1st, 2030. Producer fees are going to be calculated based on the amount and type of material and covered products that are put onto the market, and the cost of the whole system to manage the covered products as a whole. So I know there are probably a lot of questions around what are the fees going to be, how are they going to be eco-modulated, how are the fees going to be equitably distributed across all different producers, are they going to be by unit, are they going to be by weight? We don't know any of that yet. There's a lot yet to be determined. And also what underscores the way that the fees are produced is the cost of the whole system. And the cost of the whole system, as Olivia alluded to, won't be known until we go through the needs assessment and we go through the rulemaking process and better understand what kind of performance targets the PRO needs to set and how the eco-modulation is going to work. And then finally, later, after the program implementation is going for a couple of years, the producers are obligated to meet the performance targets that's set by the PRO and put into and comply with the program plan. All right, I think I hand it back over to Olivia now.
That's it. We're almost there. I'm going to take us through a couple more slides, and then we've seen some great questions in the chat. So thanks so much for everything you've submitted. Please keep them coming. We'll take as many as we can. All right, next slide, please. Okay. Everyone loves a timeline slide. I can't tell you, when we do in-person presentations, the cameras come out. So I just want to answer some of the questions we've seen in the chat. And also assure you all that you will receive these slides following this presentation. This timeline is also on our website. So I'm gonna go through this relatively quickly so that we can get to your questions. And we've touched on some of the, especially the imminent deadlines here. But let's just highlight a few things here. So by January 1st, 2026, pro applications are due to CalRecycle. That is the date by which TRA will be submitting an application to CalRecycle for consideration. CalRecycle is then set to select a PRO no later than March 1st. What happens as a fast follow to that just a few months later is producers have a requirement to register with that approved pro. And I think we mentioned it earlier, but I just want to underscore again, at least for the first few years of this program, there will be just a single pro. So CalRecycle will approve, there may be multiple pros that apply, but ultimately CalRecycle will approve one pro to implement SB 707 for the foreseeable future. We talked a few times now about the needs assessment. That work will kick off in early 2026. Again, can't underscore enough how important that is to inform program planning. That's data that will go towards coming up with reasonable targets, coming up with fair fees, and trying to figure out, where investment can best flow to meet those performance targets. The other ongoing activity starting in 2026 is rulemaking. I believe that is not expected to conclude before 2028. So this is quite a lengthy process. And it's the one through which CalRecycle will develop regulations that help clarify, interpret, and implement what is in the law. We've said it a few times, I'll say it again. It's really only after the needs assessment and rulemaking that there will be more clarity around the burning producer questions on fees, eco-modulation, that sort of combination of bonus and malus fees that incentivize or disincentivize certain design choices. Those will all be informed by program costs, and we'll ladder up to things like performance standards as well. So there is near-term activity for producers and other stakeholders to do here, and we want to encourage you to engage from this earliest stage in the process. But it is going to be a couple years until we have answers to some of those questions. In particular, the big one, what is this all going to cost me? The Pro has 1 year from the approval of those regulations to develop and then ultimately submit a program plan to CalRecycle. And then as soon as that program plan is approved by CalRecycle, that is when producer fees take effect. So that is expected sometime mid-2030. The program must be fully rolled out across California by 2031. And producers are going to have to meet the performance standards that will be articulated in the program plan and have to be signed off on by CalRecycle by 2032. So there's a lot more than that, but these are sort of the big milestones and deadlines, and there will be more to come as implementation unfolds, and certainly as things like rulemaking begin. Can we go to the next slide, please, Mike? Great. As I said, it's really early days. My main message here is to stay engaged with us, with CalRecycle. There's a number of other organizations that are hosting their own forums and webinars. And I think the more information and the more you can do to educate yourself at this point, the better. Found on the producer side that, early education and internal conversations can help your organization sort of set themselves up for the roles and responsibilities will be when it comes to compliance with SB 707 and textile EPR. Sign up for our updates and newsletters, join these webinars. CalRecycle doesn't have an upcoming information session. They've held 2. There will be more. Their website is also a great resource. And again, there's a lot we don't know, but the earlier you tune in, the easier it will be for you to develop a sense of your organization's obligations and opportunities, whether you are a producer or a service provider. The only other thing I'd mention on this slide is we are seeking letters of support for our application if that's something your organization is interested in doing. This is a non-binding letter that enables us to list your organization as one of our supporters or as one of those that would like to see our organization named as the PRO when we apply to CalRecycle. This letter is by no means the requirement to engage with us, to join these forums, to get information from us, but certainly appreciate it if you feel this organization is well positioned to deliver on the requirements of SB 707. And then next slide, please, Nick. So to bring us home here, we're going to have one more webinar before the end of the year. In our next session, we'll unpack the requirements, again, the knowns, the unknowns related to the needs assessment, rulemaking process, and the program planning process. So I hope we'll see you all in there. Please sign up to join us. And any questions in the meantime, drop them into the Q&A here or reach out to us via the email address that I'm sure has been pasted at least once in our chat. So with that, I think we're ready to go to Q&A. Would welcome any of our